This week's episode is packed. We've got police confirming shocking abuse allegations against Chatunga Mugabe, bombshell confessions by his brother Robert Jr, and the Trabalas Interchange pretty much blowing through its budget. Unfortunately, you're the one who's going to be paying for it. There is also one of the most disturbing stories I've ever heard in my professional career of a teenager who tried to sell a human fetus in Central Harare, claiming it was beef. And all of this happens in a week where a scientist was unalived in cold blood. And while a tragic accident took human lives in SA, mostly Zimbabwean lives, it is another week of Zimbabweans who left home for greener pastures losing their lives, and some returning home belly up. Zimbabweans at home enduring another week of brutality and graft by a family whose patriarch was a genocidal, power-hungry thug, and the cronies that he pretty much left behind. I'm Maynard, and this is the Saturday Roundup. Let's dive in. Weeks ago, Chatunga Mugabe almost killed a man, three men actually. We found out that it was in a rampage that was so bad it would be illegal in a war zone, let alone a country at peace. He was arrested for it later and then released on a meager $200 bail bond of that nature. We asked the police the big questions that a lot of Zimbabweans have been asking. Why was Chatunga Mugabe only charged with assault? Why not kidnapping? And why are there no firearms offenses when we are told that the rampage involved guns? Because look, let's be clear, what happened at Kushungo Dairy was not a fist fight. It was torture. The victims, they were electrocuted. They were held hostage. Some were beaten with metal rods. Some were even tasered. You would imagine that is a situation that you see in movies about American soldiers interrogating, suspected terrorists. It's brutal torture that you wouldn't think happens in a place that is at peace. And yet, after all of that, there is no kidnapping charge. There are no torture charges. And torture is especially important because torture is considered a war crime. Yet, we hear that it is happening during peacetime in Zimbabwe, and not even by soldiers or the police. We're kind of used to police brutality. You're talking about private bodyguards of the son of a former president who was pretty famous for doing things like that. Here's the official response to the police, for all those questions that I was rambling about. To open quote, the police spokesperson said, Bellarmine Chatunga is facing 7 counts of assault. The complainants are Joram Girazi, 38, Waddington Mutadza, who is pretty old, 83, who beats up an 83-year-old man, and Elvis Bumbe, who's 24, Philip Chikona, who is 48, and Nyayokuza Ngube, who's 31, and a guy called Colin Mchengwa. That's a long list of victims, by the way. Well, that's my opinion, that's not part of the statement, but that's a long list of victims. Police say, investigations are in full swing to find out if firearms were used in these cases, and then if they were duly registered. Mugabe's accomplices, Chatunga Mugabe's accomplices, that is a guy called Munashe Mapawo, Brennan Mateko, and Peter Fredso. They've all been arrested and they appeared in court together with Bellarmine Chatunga Mugabe. We are also investigating allegations that Chatunga stormed out of the police station. You remember one of the things that happened is when he was first brought to the station, he told the officer in charge that, you can't arrest me, I'm the son of the real president of this country. And, he basically said, up yours, to the officer in charge, and then stormed out. So police are saying they're investigating that. Police also say that Chatunga spent a night in police custody. He actually, slept in the cells, and they say the law will take its course without fear or favor, despite one's status or social standings. The police also, in their responses to Dagab, said the Mugabe family neighbors, they advised to alert the police if they face any threats or security concerns, especially from Chatunga Mugabe's bodyguards or their farm security, that are being reported to be on a rampage with AK-47s, torture movie style. And the police are saying to the neighbors, if it happens, report to us. And lastly, the police say all suspects have been ordered to produce their firearm licenses in the next few days, and anyone abusing firearms will face the full wrath of the law under the Firearms Act, Chapter 10.09. So those are pretty much the charges against Chatunga Mugabe and the accomplices, the guys that did it with him. You recall he instructed his bodyguards to do this, although he did, partake and hit that guy whose arm he broke. But those charges, they raise more questions than they actually answer. We called Robert Mugabe Jr. for comment because we were told that he was around, and after answering to us, he started pretending to be Chatunga's personal assistant, but he hadn't realized that we'd gotten his number and tied it to his registration. And prior to that, he had actually video called us by mistake, and the phone had ran on for quite some seconds. So we saw him and the number was his. Robert admitted that there was a case where one person was electrocuted with a taser, but he said police even came to the house and the victims were illegal gold panners, makorokoza. That's what he said, that makorokoza nomaziere. And look, it's a 7-minute phone call, but after that he just launched into quite a tirade of insults towards the gold panners, towards us. The 7-minute phone call itself, it will blow your mind when we release it together with the full-on story about the Mugabe family and what's happening, the allegations they're facing, and the things that they're claiming. It's fully loaded, and we're still working on it. What we do know, however, is this: there's been serious tension at Gushungo Dairy, which is the farm where the Mugabes own. Sources tell us that trespassers have been killing cows, right? Mugabe he had a lot of Jersey cows that he was using. That milk was supplying ice cream factories or something of that sort. And apparently trespassers or makorokoza, they've been killing these cows and eating them, that there's very few left, and that they stormed the farm premises. They've deliberately uprooted trees and vandalized agricultural equipment. That's the allegation. And that's not all. Apparently this got so bad, these farm invasions at Mugabe's farm, they got so bad that Chatunga, on the day that this is supposed to have happened, Chatunga is said to have gone to Vice President Chiwenga personally, begging for help. We hear this from a close, family contact, because apparently this is how bad, things are for the Mugabe family at the farm with regards to people trespassing on it, digging up trees and destroying agricultural infrastructure, such that the place is now run down. One source even said that the Mugabe family is basically under siege, because what's happening is that the trespassers, they then claim to be acting on behalf of their first family, of the first family, the current one. And apparently they say, hey, look, we've been sent by the first family, or we are doing this for the first family. If you want to remove us, call the first family. The first family being the Mnangagwas, which of course we put to the Mnangagwa family, and they totally deny this. They instead actually pointed out to a number of instances where they say the Mnangagwa family has actually helped Mugabe's widow, Grace. And we are even in receipt of a video of Grace giving some speech at some place after Mugabe was no longer president. And in that video, Grace was actually thanking Emmerson Mnangagwa for chartering a flight for her. I don't know where she was and she had to travel, and apparently Emmerson Mnangagwa intervened to charter a private jet for her. It's a bit of an old video, but the Mnangagwa family say, hey, look, this is the sign of the kind of relations, goodwill and gesture that we've extended to the former president's family, and they absolutely deny sending any kind of gold panas, saying we are not gold miners. We invited the Mugabe family via an emissary to give us this side of the story, to give us evidence of the vandalism at the farm, and to also give us evidence of the invaders that are supposedly linked to the first family, or anything that ties the Mnangagwa family to what the Mugabe family are saying. Both Robert Jr. and the emissary that we spoke to, we are still waiting for that evidence. That's not yet been supplied to us. Obviously, being the family of a former head of state, we put this to government straight up to ask them that is the government or is the first family deliberately victimizing the former president's family? That's what they're claiming. That's why Chatunga beat the living lights out of those security guards. But that government source said, and I open quotes, he said, look, we are battling name droppers in Zimbabwe. It's a serious issue, but the first family has got absolutely no gripe with Grace Mugabe. And if the Mugabes called the police instead of kidnapping people, we would gladly assist. The problem is they kidnap people and that becomes a police matter. And when the police get involved in the matter, they then come to us and want us to assist, and when we decline, they say we are victimizing them, but we're simply refusing to be part of a story where individuals are said to have been tortured. So that's pretty much what the government source said. Trying to remember these statements, it's a bit tough off the top of my head, but the parts of the story, they're still chilling. Look, gold panas are nasty people, right? They murder people with machetes. Mashurugwi, Timirema, Bemba, they're given so many names. So it makes sense to confront them, while you're armed. They are seriously and legitimately not nice people. They murder people and they throw them into pits. They beat up people. They are extremely violent. They are not the kind of people that you would go, with kiddies' gloves and offer them a cup of tea. Yet, if the Mugabe family is targeting gold panas, why are they beating up a random guy who asked for directions at a place far away from the farm, which is one of the charges? And why are they assaulting security guards from next door? Somebody breaks into your house and you go and you beat up your neighbor to say, if you saw the break-in, you should have intervened. It doesn't make sense. You would understand Chatunga wanting to defend his property from trespassers and gold panas who are killing his cows and his properties. Never mind the irony of Mugabe, who led farm invasions, now his family suffering farm invasions. But look, remember, some of these assaults, especially by Chatunga, especially ones where he uses a taser, they are not limited to the farm where this happened. They happened in town, they happened in the city. Some of these issues are to do with him, road rage, his car has been cut off, he comes out with a taser and he tases the driver in the neck, the potential firearms offenses. And there's something also more concerning. In our recorded phone call with Robert Jr., his description of gold panas, right, and his general demeanor towards gold panas or the people that they beat, almost referencing them to things like rats and mice, also calling us mice, it makes you think, what is that about? Because fair and fine, we all might be poor. We don't have the Mugabe kind of wealth, and gold panas are certainly poor artisanal miners, and they may be reported that sometimes they're violent. But the security guards, for instance, that were beaten and that were also referred to as mice, they are ultimately human beings and they deserve justice and they have human rights. It's a concerning attitude, it's a concerning stance, because for so long, we've always said their father, Robert Mugabe, had a disdain for Zimbabweans. He didn't care if Zimbabweans lived or died. He thought we were just like tissue paper that could be stepped on, and you're seeing Robert Jr. echoing the same thing. Nonetheless, we looked into this, right? And what we found instead was a disdain for everyone else, an attitude that says, we are the humans, we are the it, and everyone is pretty much, a cockroach. You'll listen to the call, in the final episode. It will be almost offensive, the kind of attitude, the lacklusterness. I think at some point he even says, yeah, he hit someone with a weapon, so what, or something like that. And if Robert Jr.'s attitude towards the lives of the poor is a reflection of his family's conduct, then obviously we have a problem. So after that phone call, that is the stance that we had, that we've got a problem. There is clearly abuse, there's excesses, and there is a general attitude that views human life as meaningless unless they are a Mugabe or a Mnangagwa. So it left us with a lot of answers. The Mugabes now so above humanity that they have a right to brutalize and kill anyone who is not politically connected. This is no longer just about one farm then, isn't it? It's a pattern, because it's happening in so many different places. The attitude is alarming and concerning. There's a disdain for human life, a disdain for human rights, the same kind of attitude that says we matter, you don't. And obviously after that, our investigation continued, and it is continuing. So we've also reached out to Chatunga. We did reach out to Robert Jr. as explained. We also reached out to Mugabe, and even sent messages through to Grace Mugabe via an emissary, because, by the way, a lot of these assaults are happening on their farms. What's happening is people are said they're being taken away from neighboring farms, from different places. So they get taken away, and when they get taken away, they're brought onto the farm, then they get beaten. And we send questions, like, is this the kind of legacy that the family wants to perpetuate? Robert Mugabe had people raped, maimed, and tortured for fun. On this app, on YouTube, just watch the 2008 election documentaries to see for yourself. There is one by Hopo Chingono. It is absolutely disturbing. There is other difference. I think one by Jenny Man. It's disturbing. People had their limbs chopped off, their legs chopped off. People were brutalized. There are videos of people killed with screwdrivers, right? If you also search on this app, the Zenzele documentary by Sight about Gukura Wundi, and you hear some of those testimonies, you get absolutely appalled. And obviously, Mugabe responded by calling that a moment of pure madness, without anyone ever saying, moment of madness, who was mad? Because the killing was wanton, especially in Matabeleland areas and in Midlands areas. So we asked, is this what the Mugabe family still stands for? Kidnapping poor security guards, beating them till their bones and their skulls are broken? So far, there's been no response. But we didn't stop there. We approached some of the government ministers to ask them if this government condones some of these kind of actions. We grilled them a little bit. One of those ministers did respond. He was absolutely appalled and shocked when he saw the images of the victim, who was clearly beaten and tortured. He had a broken arm. His entire backside had lots of scars and cuts. He looked like somebody who had been put in a grinder. But anyway, that minister afterwards did step in to help privately, and is making consultations, because this little guy, his story looked like it was going to get ignored. Police have incorrectly charged him and so forth. But more of that soon. Our investigation into the Mugabe family, it's just starting, so keep tuned. It's coming, and there is a lot. $114 million American dollars. That's the final price tag for the Trabalas interchange in Harare, named after President Mnangagwa's old war nickname. Finance Minister Mbudzi Interchange confirmed this week that the original budget, which was 88 million, and that trended a lot on Twitter and even on Facebook, because everybody said that interchange is not worth 88 million. South Africa has built interchanges twice that size, and it didn't cost that. But guess what? The price for that interchange is now ballooned by an additional 26 million. And here's how we've managed to get to that figure. $88 million was borrowed from fossil mines. Then, without asking Parliament, which is dodgy if not illegal, 26 million was taken in IMF special drawing rights, and that was added to the final budget to cover relocation costs. Pressed by MPs, Mugabe said, you can't plan for everything up front. Projects overrun, it's normal. Of course, MPs were absolutely appalled. 26 million is a lot of money, and opposition MPs specifically, they weren't buying it. So they demanded to know how a world-class budget didn't include space for relocating families and demolishing buildings. Because 26 million is no small figure. A project can go above by 2 million or 3 million or under. It's understandable. Inflation is not constant. But Mugabe broke it down like this. He said 65 million was on hard infrastructure. $16 million was on bridges, 2.4 million on supervisor fees, and 4.4 million on electrical work. Pretty stunning figures. Expensive when compared to other places, but just how then did it overrun by 26 million? That was just for moving people. No tenders were discussed. No detailed breakdown has been shared. The government is now pushing to replicate Trabalas in other places of Harare. Like Geopomona and all that. Shocking money. It's not just going to stay in Harare. They're trying to do the same thing in different towns, Bulawayo, Gweru, etc. But MPs say, nope, not so fast. First, explain the overrun. So, was this normal cost overrun, or was this the latest episode of Zimbabwean government overspending to benefit a few people? And more importantly, was it even worth it? Because the question is, do we measure good governance by smooth roads, or do we measure it by how transparently they are built? It's a key question, isn't it? Do we just want infrastructure at all costs? Let's take on Geopomona, never mind the cost. Let's have smooth roads, never mind how much it costs, even if it's 10 times above budget and there's overpricing. We want the infrastructure at all costs. Or do we want things to be transparently built at the lowest cost possible, because ultimately we then get to pick up the tab for that? Now, our own investigation by Dug Up it's in its infancy. But on the surface, the numbers do not add up. The 114 million, it does not add up. And we feel and are getting indications there's more. And some of the people who are going to be compensated, and some compensated for relocation, are people who didn't own land there. So already we've got instances where we are getting surface evidence of looting, where other people who don't own land there will get paid $100,000 and they never owned anything. But keep watching. We will have more soon when that investigation is ready, and that's going to be pretty soon. In somber news, tragedy struck early on Tuesday on the N1 near Musina. A Zimbabwe-bound bus, Mzansi Express, it hit a stationary pickup, and then it swerved onto incoming traffic, sideswiping a haulage truck. Several passengers died. Emergency services arrived at 3:20 a.m., but the damage was done, and a lot of people could not be saved at all. Witnesses say the pickup truck had no warning triangle, no hazard lights. The right side of the bus was shredded on impact. Survivors say it was chaos. It's a deadly reminder of the razor-thin margins on Africa's highways. A triangle, a hazard light. Just a few seconds of visibility. That's all it could have taken to save lives. And now those lives are gone. Breadwinners, people who just trying to survive with no idea. Buses travel at night. Some people were sleeping and never saw it coming. It's quite terrible. But it begs the question, should cross-border buses have stricter inspection and safety protocols before they depart, because a lot of people are dying on that stretch of road. And how do we hold reckless breakdowns accountable? Because if your car breaks down in the road and it's just standing there, it's a hazard. Someone's going to run into it, and it's more often than not, when that happens, there's just going to be loss of life, So what do we do to cure that? We've got a lot of traffic between Zimbabwe and South Africa, and that stretch of road has killed quite a lot of people. In one of the week's most disturbing cases, police arrested a 19-year-old Steli Marecha in central Harare. He allegedly picked up a human fetus from a bin. It's like a dead human baby. It was wrapped in a black plastic, and then he tried to sell that meat to an unsuspecting person as beef. Apparently, this trade happened at the corner of Mbuyanehanda and Albion in Harare. The man that he offered that beef to, he called the police. He picked it up that, what the hell, that's a human baby. And he called the police. Marecha was arrested for violating a corpse. Investigators are now trying to find out which cruel one of you guys dumped that fetus in a bin to begin with. And the police are asking the public for help, because they've effectively got nowhere to start. It's an unidentified fetus, so they'll need the public to step in. Do you know somebody that looked pregnant who all of a sudden isn't pregnant anymore and you don't see their baby? But think about this. How broken must society be for someone to find a fetus in a bin and think, profit? What kind of desensitization are we dealing with here? Marecha, sorry, Jesus. Mbudzi Interchange's fans, I'm sorry about that. Marecha has been charged with violating a corpse. But the bigger mystery is who left the fetus in that bin? Who did that? Surely somebody somewhere out there, born of a woman, actually knows, and the police need your help. But it's a story that leaves us asking, have we become numb to the sacredness of life itself? Like life just, it's become so cheap and it means absolutely nothing. Because consider this next story, and again, it's one of the most disturbing stories that we've had in a while, and this happening in the same week. A 12-year-old boy, Keith John, he was killed and mutilated in Harare's Eastview suburb last Saturday. The man accused of this horror is 31-year-old Panashe Mkura. That's pretty young. It's being done for murder. Now, Panashe, he's been charged with murder and he remains in police custody. Wonder why the police officer charged with murder, is not in custody. Quite duplicious by the NPA. But anyway, he's charged with murder. According to prosecutors, the boy's mother left him in the care of his grandfather. Later that day, don't know how, but Panashe managed to allegedly convince the child to go spend the night at his mother's house. But that night turned into something of a nightmare, really. There's no other way to put it across. Prosecutors say that Mukura, he used a pair of scissors to stab the boy in the neck, and then he chopped off his secret parts. He poked his nose with a comb, and then he half buried the body in a backyard garden. It's brutal, nasty stuff to think back, to just try and get these details out of your mind. It's messed up, but it is what happened. Now, in the morning, he told neighbors that the boy had gone missing, but then neighbors found blood stains, including on Panashe's clothes. So soon after, because they kind of started to smell a rat, soon after they discovered Kid's body not far off. It's the kind of crime that It leaves the city frozen. Like, how does a human commit such cruelty to a child? I mean, such cruelty wouldn't be acceptable to a dog. You'd get arrested for it. I think the community would probably be up in arms and beat you blue black if you did that to a cat. How do you commit such cruelty to a child? What is it? Something that broke inside this man? Were there any warning signs that people didn't see? It's all just disturbing, because this wasn't just a murder. It was a calculated, brutal act on someone who is defenseless, young, and who stood absolutely no chance. And we must ask ourselves, are our communities doing enough to protect children in these vulnerable households? Is it even the responsibility of the community? Is the government doing enough? Are things like safeguarding children even a thing, back home? It's such a terrible story, but it's happened. And I kind of realized that for such a long time, Zimbabwe was, we're peaceful, we don't get to see a lot of things. But we aren't so far from South Africa anymore, because I think every other week we actually do have a story about murder. And speaking of murder, Dr. Fortune Gome, a 39-year-old Zimbabwean scientist, was found fatally injured on a street in Dundee in Scotland. She died at the scene. A 20-year-old man has been charged with her murder. Dr. Gome was a water planner with Scottish Water, I think. She had earned her PhD from the University of Dundee not long ago. I can't quite remember, forgive my memory. I did remember this before, but that recounting that murder of that boy and the beef fetus thing just kind of threw me off. But the university described her as brilliantly, both intellectually and emotionally. Her former colleagues, they say they are heartbroken. Police Scotland say the attack, it's not believed to pose any further risk to the public. I saw South African Twitter going on about blacks are now being hunted and killed by white extremists in the UK, etc. Zimbabweans are on target. I saw on a few South African xenophobic Twitter accounts or anti-South African. It was just weird. I saw it, but Police Scotland did say in a statement that they don't think that attack poses any greater risk to African migrants. But they're urging people not to speculate, which we shouldn't do when something like this happens. Dr. Gome's death it's rocked the Zimbabwean diaspora in the UK. She was thriving, and now she's gone. Friends say she was the one you'd go to when you needed clarity, not just of mind, but clarity of the heart. Hey, former university and the African student community in Dundee in Scotland, they're in mourning, just as pretty much Zimbabweans are also in mourning, because this wasn't just a random life lost overseas. This was brilliance that's now been stolen. She was the kind of person Zimbabwe needs more of. We get a bad rap sometimes when we're always in the news, especially in the UK. We're always in the news for, if it's carers, it's for abusing elderly people or for assaulting vulnerable people sexually. So this is the kind of Zimbabwean that we need. But now she's gone in a senseless act of violence. It asks you, or it wants you to ask the question, is there enough being done to protect immigrants in the UK from targeted or opportunistic violence, even though the police say don't speculate and they don't think this is the case? And you wonder, will the courts in Scotland deliver justice swiftly? There is not a thing as a death sentence in the UK, and even their life sentences don't really always mean life. It's always life with a minimum term. Very rarely does someone get real life and it means life. Anyway, that's your roundup. If you have any information about any of these stories, please reach out. And if you're watching this from the diaspora or from Zimbabwe, stay sharp, stay safe, stay curious. I'm Maynard. I'll see you next week.